listening to Development Works, produced by Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses. Hello friends, I'm Andrew Wilson.
And I'm Michael Carlson. This is Development Works for June 2017.
And on today's upcast, when doing international development, your success depends on the currency you build in the community.
We hear from Yassaman Nouri, an international development worker with experience in microfinancing and international business all over the world.
Now, Yassaman Nouri is originally from Tehran, raised in Vancouver, and has worked in Iran, China, Malawi, Tajikistan, in international trade, international development, social entrepreneurship, impact investing, and credit unions. She's had the privilege to contribute to organizations of all sizes, from one-person startups to large global firms, on all types of projects, from strategy development to implementation and operation. So, examples of where she's worked: Central One Credit Union, Van City, Malawi Union of Savings and Credit Cooperatives, the Aga Khan Foundation of Canada, and many more that I just don't have time to list. She has a wealth of experience in microfinance and international development, and she is here this month to give us a better perspective on the cross-section of the two. Today on the Upcast, Yassaman lets us know what works in international development.
But first, this Upcast is powered by Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses. We're a Canadian charity that sponsors the medical education of high-potential youth in rural Nicaragua. If you want to ensure everyone has access to quality healthcare, first visit doctorsfordoctors.ca.
Once a week for an hour, I sat down with my boss. His name is Dirk Hack, who's one of the greatest people that ever entered my life. And I could ask him any question. And that's when I started to realize about the credit union model and about, these financial models and these technical geeky things that I'm interested in can actually be used to develop communities and help solve problems. If you guys don't know the model, if I look at a banking model, so let's say I'm the manager of the bank, Andrew is a customer of the bank, and you guys are the shareholders. And my job as a manager at end of the year, I'm talking about how much money I made you guys. So I'm using Andrew, my customer. I'm looking at how do I sell him products and services so I can make you guys money. And that's extremely simplified version as to my view on how banks work. When it comes to a credit union, the client and the shareholders are the same person. And so if you want to go and open up a savings account or get a loan or do whatever in a credit union, the first thing you need to do is buy a membership. And so that conflict is taken out already. And so as a manager, I'm not thinking, I'm using you to make them money. It's you are all the same person. And so when it comes to internationally, when it comes to trust, that trust is a bit more there because you're not thinking, the rich man who has the bank who's going to make money. If I don't pay my loan, it's fine because he has a ton of money anyway. So when you're going and you're saying, if you don't pay back your loan, it's the teacher that cannot buy food for her family, or it's the farmer who cannot buy supplies to, make his land. So it changes those conversations. But, credit unions most of the time started in places where people weren't bankable. So they didn't have the credit, they didn't have various different things that the banks are looking for them to give them services. So the credit unions, even Van City, started in the east side of Vancouver with the unbanked. And so they look at various other ways. So if, for example, you don't have the credit, you're looking at what's the character of the person, what's their history. If you don't have a credit to say, you go and walk and talk to the neighbors and talk to etc. So you look at the five C's. But also what credit unions do is, because they're a community, they have the view of, I'm in a community, I'm solving a problem. And in many communities, they have to give a percentage back to their community. In Malawi, I could be wrong, but I think it was 15%. So at the end of the year, the board needs to sit down and go, okay, this percentage of money, where in the community do we need to spend it? Where is the need? Is it that the school that's down the road doesn't have toilets separate for girls and we need to build a toilet? Is it what? And every community may be small or big, but that community mentality is very much entrenched in the skeleton of credit unions, I would say. I used to do microcredit. I love the idea of microcredit and group lending, if you've heard of it. And one of the criticisms of that is that, it worked with Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh really, really well. But when it's been copy-pasted in other places, it doesn't necessarily, because that model may not work other places. And I didn't really understand that until this work with Dixon, where I'd suggest things that really, really worked well. He'd be like, nah. I'd be like, why? I totally ask a million questions, and he'd spend the time to be like, this is why this is why that. This is how things work here. This is how lending works here, etc., etc.
Yassaman there mentioned the 5 C's. And just so everyone knows, to clarify, the 5 C's in loans are character, capacity, capital, collateral, and conditions on any loan. So these are just the regular kind of things that you would consider about your friend before lending them $20.
So thanks for that, Mike. And Yassaman completely changed my views on credit unions, kind of repositioning them as international development pillars. It gives access to money for people who need it most and who wouldn't normally have access to it. And I can think of so many different populations that I've seen that would benefit from models like this.
Keeping money in the community is a trend that we've seen repeatedly on this upcast and this show for doing any good development. But I hadn't really considered it from a banking angle. We actually can give the banks back to the local people.
And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. So if you're interested in this at all, you should look into it more because it can be an incredible way to give back locally and internationally, as we've seen.
And if you haven't already, try heading down to your local credit union for all those folks out there in Radio Land, because as I always say, a bank for the people and by the people is good for people.
What is that? Yeah, you always do say that, though.
I said it when I woke up this morning.
Now, Mike, this next piece is short and powerful. I think you're really going to like this story. Let's actually roll it back to one of Yassaman's regrets.
One of the things I regret the most, actually, is in Ulimi. I met this chief. I have a picture of him, so every time I used to have him as the background of my phone. And I went to interviewed a bunch of people, and I came and I was telling him what I had done in Mumbai. So 5-7 projects came out of Mumbai, and I was really excited. So I went to Ulimi and I was like, we did all this in Ulimi. And he was like, can you not tell me happy stories unless you're actually going to do it in my community? And I was like, sorry? He's like, I look like an idiot in front of my community because I go every time there is a Mzungu in town. And I say we're going to do all this and it's going to change the lives of women and youth and ABCD and we're going to bring all this. And they don't believe me anymore. And he was like, so if you're actually going to do something, let me know when you're ready and you're going to actually put in the work. And I swear I will have a band. I'll have someone with the megaphone and yelling it out, and we'll have a dance and a party, and we'll do whatever we need to give our youth jobs and ABCD. But make sure that you're actually ready for that. I ended up not staying in Malawi for longer because at that time I was thinking of staying 2 to 4 years later. So unfortunately, I'm one of the stat of the Mzungus that went to him and was like, I want to do all this. And I never did anything in Ulimi. So it was a lesson learned that later on I regretted a lot because that chief, I was like, I will do something in your community. And I never did. But I think it was going back to it would have been like, I'm here. I think I'll be here for this amount of time. I have no idea. These are the projects I've done in the past. We may or may not be able to, it was the excited part of me that learned a few lessons.
So listen up here. That last point where she walked us through exactly what she would have said to the chief in hindsight was a moment of great vulnerability and honesty on her part. Overcommitting abroad is something that almost everyone I have talked to has done in international development. But everyone's so ashamed of it that they don't even talk about it, and therefore they don't pass that information on to the next generation. If you're working internationally, this is essential for you to hear. You are going to get excited, and you are going to overpromise things. You need to keep this in mind with a voice in the back of your head saying, how can I commit to this community less? How can I turn my excitement into good questions and follow through action and not the over-promising of action? I love that Yassaman took us through that.
I'm reminded of our favorite catchphrase on this show: if you aren't making mistakes, you aren't working on hard enough problems. Because in this example, for Yassaman to highlight that even committing to a problem with locals can actually be the problem itself. It's super interesting. We see things like this all the time with this overcommitment idea. All throughout the world, trust in politicians worldwide is at an all-time low because they're just overcommitting to solving problems. But, I don't want to get into political talk. Let's save all my political conversations for my other podcast soon to be released, Political Memoirs with Mike, coming out this fall.
Yeah, sounds riveting. This next piece is centered around the idea of building trust. So let's listen to how Yassaman took the time to make that happen.
Malawi, for me, was the first place where I felt like I had a purpose and what I was doing was meaningful. And it wasn't because I really did anything exceptional. It was because the people that were there opened their arms. But I think they opened their arms because I took the time to say, I'm here, I'm open to learn, and I want to be a part of this community. But in order to be a part of this community, I need to learn. So I need to ask these questions. And as stupid or as naive or as whatever these questions may be, I need to get them out. And I had some people that were extremely brutally honest. There was a IT manager at Musco. I call him Dan the Man, because he'd really wake me up when I really needed to wake up. There were times where he'd be like, this is Africa. You need to come out of Canada. Realize that this is Africa. This is ABCD you should be looking at. You should not be looking at this. And it's there were times where I'd come out crying, but it was a wake-up call that I needed. And I think it was because we took the time to build those relationships and build the trust, it was mutual back and forth. So whenever I don't think I made as many mistakes, if you may call it mistakes, and I think it's because whatever I wanted to do, I would share it. I would share it from everybody from the management team to the security, to the bus driver, be like, this is what I'm thinking you're doing. And then people would give this funny look of what? I'm like, eh. People are okay, what am I missing? And they jab at it. And we'd massage it and we'd change it. But the people gave me the freedom to try it. And we tried and we'd change it a bit. I think for me, the biggest thing that came out of all my international work was really the relationships, taking the time to build those trusting relationships, get to understand what I'm working on, what are the systems, who are the people, who's involved, what are the positive impacts, but really look at what are the potential negative impacts that I've missed. And that I got from basically the community. And then when we figured out the negative impacts, some of it was okay, I need to modify what I'm doing. In some cases, it was okay, I need to partner with these people so they can help me with that part. And some parts of it, you're just going to have to accept. You're going to take part of what you're doing out. But I had a more clear view as to what I was doing and what was the impact of it.
That was such a beautiful example, and Yassaman reaffirms my constant belief that building relationships and listening to locals is paramount to any good development that you're doing. She gave examples even of talking to her bus driver, which I loved, about her ideas. But one thing I'm curious about with her and her philosophy of asking locals is how that's balanced with the additional work being asked of the locals by actually answering. So let me put it another way. I'm always weary of putting more work onto locals, even if it's to listen and answer questions, because that can take a lot of effort.
Yeah, which is a really good point, because there clearly has to be a balance between involving the community and then just offloading work onto them.
True that.
I think the balance lies in their excitement around the project and what you give in thanks to the people who are giving you their opinions on your work.
And balance is hard between those two, but I think it's important to always remember what work you're asking of locals.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Now, Yassaman was a great speaker because she was real. She opened herself up here, and this is someone with a ton of experience. So thank you so much for that, Yassaman. The audience, including myself, really related to her because she told simple stories around very, very complex topics. Now, she's currently teaching in various courses related to social impact on Social Enterprise Institute, such as like how to use systems thinking to solve social problems, how to use storytelling to connect with stakeholders, and coaching and mentoring various entrepreneurs and startups to help them scale their impact. So if you're interested in that out there in Radio Land, just let her know. So thank you very much, Yassaman.
And for all our listeners out there, if you want to hear everything that Yassaman said, or any of our other speakers for Development Works said unedited, you can always come to our live recordings at the University of Toronto downtown campus in Toronto, Canada. Check out our website, doctorsfordoctors.ca, to find all the event details. Our Canadian charity strives to do the best international development work possible, and as we continue to learn, we are sharing all of our learnings with you.
And we would love to hear from you too. So drop us a line on our website if you want to volunteer or get involved.
And now, updates for the month.
In Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses this month, we sent payments down to Nicaragua for our 3 medical students in Nicaragua. So keep learning to save lives, Brian, Kimberly, and Brandon. And we're just getting their grade reports now, and they're looking as great as always.
Such smart kids.
I love that we have such strong students, Mike. That's all on my end.
On our Canadian side, in Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses, as always, we're slowing down for the summer. Doesn't mean we're out, just going slower. But look out for some big changes in DFD and NFN this September when we hit the ground running. So we're super excited for everything from new leadership changes to student club events, and maybe even some new Nicaraguan medical students too, we can hope.
And that does it for this month's update on Doctors for Doctors and Nurses for Nurses. And for the last word, we hand it back to Yassaman.
After a few years, I had this like crisis/confusion. I went to my dad and I said, I feel guilty that I don't live in Iran and I'm not helping develop the country similar to how you're doing it. And he was like, instead of feeling guilty, you need to realize that you have 2 responsibilities. 1 is to give back to the community that embraced you. 2 is to give back to any community that didn't get that opportunity.
Well, that's a very smart father to have there. And that's everything for this month's episode of Development Works. Thanks for listening.
This is Andrew and Mike signing off, and remember, if you don't make mistakes, you're not working on hard enough problems.